Rain lashed the windshield. David gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white. Every shadow seemed to writhe, every tree a grasping hand. He just wanted to be home, away from the storm, away from the road. He'd been driving for hours, the rain starting subtly, then escalating into a torrential downpour. The familiar route had transformed into a menacing tunnel of darkness, punctuated by the blinding glare of oncoming headlights. Each mile felt like 10, the silence broken only by the rhythmic swish of the wipers. The radio crackled with static, mirroring the unease coiling in David's stomach. He switched it off, the sudden silence deafening. He was alone. Utterly alone. Headlights briefly illuminated a dilapidated house, set back from the road. It stood alone, a skeletal silhouette against the stormy sky. He'd never noticed it before. The house seemed to materialize from the storm itself, a phantom of decay. A window, like a vacant eye, caught his attention. For a fleeting moment, he could have sworn he saw a face. A woman, her pale face pressed against the glass, her eyes reflecting the stark headlights. Her expression was unreadable, lost in the interplay of light and shadow. David shook his head, attributing it to fatigue and the tricks his mind was playing. The image lingered. He couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, a chill crawling down his spine despite the warmth inside the car. The car rumbled over a pothole, jolting him back to the present. He pressed on, the fleeting image of the woman receding into the darkness. Or so he thought. The engine sputtered, coughed, and died. Silence descended, heavier than before. David swore under his breath. Not now. Not here. He tried the ignition again. Nothing. He was stranded. Rain continued its relentless assault, drumming a frantic rhythm on the car roof. He was soaked, just getting out to check the engine. A useless gesture, he knew, but he clung to a sliver of hope that he could somehow will the car back to life. Panic gnawed at the edges of his composure. He was alone, miles from civilization. His only companion, the storm raging around him. His gaze was drawn back to the dilapidated house, now swallowed by the darkness. Had it always been this close? A sudden gust of wind rattled the trees, their branches swaying like skeletal arms. The sound was almost a whisper, a voice carried on the wind. He couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable. A warning. Or a threat? He retreated to the car, the flimsy metal shell offering little comfort. He tried his phone, but there was no signal. Of course, he was trapped, at the mercy of the storm and whatever else lurked in the darkness. A tapping sound, faint at first, started from the back seat. David froze, his breath catching in his throat. It couldn't be. He was imagining things. The stress, the isolation, it was playing tricks on his mind. The tapping grew louder, more insistent. He forced himself to turn, his heart pounding against his ribs. Empty. There was nothing there. He tried to rationalize it away, but the fear was a living thing now, coiling around him, squeezing the air from his lungs. He could have sworn he heard a soft laugh, carried on the wind. It was close now, whatever it was, watching him, waiting. He was no longer alone. Through the blurry windshield, he saw her, the woman from the window. She stood on the road, her pale face illuminated by the car's headlights. Her white dress billowed around her, an ethereal apparition in the heart of the storm. She was closer now, her movements unsettlingly fluid, as if gliding over the rain-slicked asphalt. Her eyes, dark and bottomless, held his gaze. There was no malice in them, only an unnerving intensity, a hunger that sent chills down his spine. He fumbled with the car door, his fingers clumsy with fear. It wouldn't open. He was trapped, a prisoner in his own vehicle. The tapping started again, this time on the window behind him. He didn't dare turn around. He didn't need to. He knew she was there. The last vestiges of his composure crumbled. He was helpless, paralyzed by fear as she approached the car, her face a mask of eerie serenity in the relentless downpour. He squeezed his eyes shut, a whimper escaping his lips. He couldn't watch. He couldn't bear to see her face so close, but he could feel her presence, cold and ethereal, seeping into the car, wrapping around him like a shroud. The tapping stopped. He could hear his own ragged breathing, the frantic thump of his heart against his ribs. A new sound reached his ears, a soft, gentle sigh. It was right next to him. He forced his eyes open, his breath catching in his throat. She was in the car. Sitting in the passenger seat, her head tilted, her long, dark hair cascading over her shoulders. She was so close he could feel her breath on his cheek. Her lips curved into a chilling smile, her words barely a whisper, but they echoed in the silence of the car. "Hello, David." They were the last words he would ever hear.